Our guest today is two-time Grammy Award-winning arranger, jazz pianist, and composer Alan Broadbent. Alan Broadbent was born in Auckland, New Zealand, and in 1966, at the age of 19, received a Downbeat magazine scholarship to attend Berklee College of Music in Boston, and also studied with Lenny Tristano. In 1969, he was asked to join Woody Herman's band as his pianist and arranger for 3 years. In 1972, he settled in LA, beginning a musical relationship with the legendary singer Irene Krall. Soon he was also invited into the studio scene as a pianist for the great Nelson Riddle, David Rose, and Johnny Mandel. In the early 90s, he was asked to be a part of Natalie Cole's famous Unforgettable album, at which time he toured as her pianist and conductor. At this time, he wrote an orchestral arrangement for her second video with her father, Natalie Cole, When I Fall in Love, which won him his first Grammy Award for Best Orchestral Arrangement accompanying a vocal. Shortly after, he became a member of Charlie Haden's Quartet West, touring the festivals of Europe, UK, and the USA. It was while with this group that he won his second Grammy, an orchestral accompaniment written for Shirley Horn of Leonard Bernstein's Lonely Town. As a soloist with his jazz trio, Broadbent has been nominated for Grammys twice for Best Instrumental Performance in the company of such artists as Herbie Hancock, Sonny Rollins, and Keith Jarrett. In 2007, he was awarded the New Zealand Order of Merit. Broadbent is Diana Krall's conductor for her orchestra concerts and is the conductor on her Live in Paris DVD. Recently, he has been the arranger on Glenn Frey's CD with strings, After Hours, and wrote 6 string arrangements for Sir Paul McCartney's Kisses on the Bottom with the London Symphony. He has appeared on numerous recordings as both a leader and assignment. His most recent album, released June 30th, 2017, Developing Story, an album for jazz trio and orchestra with Harvey S. on bass, Peter Erskine on drums, and the London Metropolitan Orchestra. Alan, welcome to the show.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, Nikhil.
I want to go, maybe I could start quite early if that's possible. I'd like to start maybe in your development when you came to Boston. And I also went to Berklee. You went to Berklee. I believe it was a very different time, though, when you were in Boston. Could you say what it was like studying in Berklee in that period in the 70s?
Well, since I have been back to Berklee since, once as a visiting professor, my formative years there, it was much more personal. There was only like one building, one elevator, and the recording band downstairs with the great Herb Pomeroy, where I learned how to write Gil Evans-style charts. So everything, jam sessions with Charlie Mariano, everything that I did there was personal contact with each teacher. And I was also working 5 nights a week with a little trio doing standard songs and bossa nova kind of things at the Hotel Vendôme at a place called My Apartment Lounge. So I was also able to put into practice what I was learning at Berklee. And also the jazz workshop was in Copley Square. And my first week or two in Boston, coming from Auckland, New Zealand by boat.
It took 32 days on boat just to get across. Was it the Pacific, right?
That's right.
It's insane. I mean, 30 days on a boat. What did you eat on that boat? I have to know.
Well, I was in steerage, so it was basically porridge and whatever they...
Oh, man. Oh, my God.
That's all I could afford.
Oh, man. You were destined for greatness. I mean, that is an epic story. Okay, so there were some big players that swung by that club, right? You mentioned Miles Davis and all sorts of people.
Yes, exactly. Bill Evans, all my heroes showed up within the first month.
Did you get a chance to ask them questions like between sets or after the gig? Did you talk to Miles?
No. Who talked to Miles? Also, it was a different era. Young people now have no shame.
Yeah, I have no shame.
I say that with tongue in cheek, but they approach anybody they want.
Yeah.
But there was a very definite feeling of respect and also shyness. I just turned 19. I was in a world that I'd only dreamed about, and in that time, Auckland and New Zealand was a very isolated place. There was no internet, remember?
Oh, internet. Forget about it.
Forget about it. Now it's just around the corner. But then It was a boat ride. The international airport hadn't been built yet. My dad and I used to go pick scallops where the airport is now, and you could do it. You could like hop, skip, and a jump. You could fly over the islands, Tahiti, or not Tahiti, but up north towards Hawaii and over. But I couldn't afford that, so anyway, that's how I ended up in Boston.
Who are some of the other names that you saw performing there that really struck you at that point? What were the ones that really hit you? I know there was actually that story of watching Dave Brubeck in New Zealand, and that was a really eye-opening experience for you, right? Could you talk about that?
Well, that was the very first time I ever heard jazz. There was something on the radio called Take 5, which was a big hit at that moment, even in radio in New Zealand. So a friend of mine had tickets to see the Dave Brubeck show. His brother played bassoon in the symphony, so we had choice seats. And I used to read through my dad's standard songs, sheet music. He had a stack of sheet music from the war when the Americans came down. And I used to sight read them. I was a pretty good sight reader, but I had no idea how they sounded other than I liked certain melodies because of the intervals or because of the chords. And it made musical sense to me. I was trained since a boy in both theory and harmony and all the aspects of music as I was growing up playing the piano.
And it was a classical upbringing, is that correct?
That's right, with the nuns. Yeah.
But nowadays, when I hear classical upbringing, I almost assume that it's almost entirely reading. Theory is like a separate thing, and it seems like back then it seemed like when it was a classical education, at least they kind of really integrated the theory. You really kind of learned, you kind of knew what you were playing. Nowadays you get kids playing these really tough pieces, but I often wonder if they really understand what they're playing. But it seemed like you really understood music from a young age.
Well, yeah, I did, but I didn't know why. That's sort of a strange thing to say. I was innately musical, but nobody around me was able to say, hey, you're innately musical. So I had to find this out for myself, and I found out there was a radio program, a children's radio program, and every once in a while there's a thing called Sparky's Magic Piano. And I used to wait for this Sunday morning show to hear these classical pieces because they weren't played in my house or anything. And this is when I found out the power of Chopin or just, but I was like 7 or 8, and I didn't really know what was going on, except that I was moved just by the notes, not words, nothing. Just notes were doing something to me, and I couldn't say to my rugby buddies, "Hey, these notes that I hear."
Now, did you have good ears as a kid? Did you have perfect pitch? Did you have relative pitch? How were your ears developed back then?
Sister Mary Joan couldn't figure out why I was getting the intervals as she would test me so fast, and then she found out that I knew the notes. Oh. So I go, it was F to B, that's a tritone. Rather than hearing the intervals, I was hearing the notes. So I do have perfect pitch. But just by reading through Dad's sheet music and stuff, I found some standards that I really loved, and I'd put them aside, but I would use the harmonies of the sheet music. And just going back to Sparky's Magic Piano, if anybody's interested with the miracle of the internet and YouTube, it's on YouTube now, Sparky's Magic Piano. So you can experience what I experienced if you're...
Is there any particular song that you remember from that so that we can all say, oh, that was Alan Broadbent's, or did you like the whole show?
I loved the whole show, the whole... sentiment of it and everything was very, very sweet. It gets me all choked up about it when I think about it. But yes, the thing that spoke to me was, I will now play Chopin's Etude in C sharp minor number 4. And it was at that moment what I would wait for, when Chopin reached out over 200 years to this little boy in Onehunga, New Zealand. and did something to him. And I have never lost that feeling for music. And when I heard Dave Brubeck, the very first thing, in Now Great Seats, Paul Desmond comes out and rests against the bell of the piano, and they start a tune called Tangerine. And Tangerine was one of my very favorite songs. And it hit me like a brick. I didn't know that you could play Tangerine like that. Not only that, Dave's chords and Paul's melodic invention, I knew right away. I knew that this was something I had to learn how to do. But there was that extra thing about it, that feeling, what it was doing to my body as well as my mind. And that combination I had to get to learn. And, the epitome of this would be Bud Powell, of that kind of intensity.
When you must have been really struck because you won a scholarship to Berklee, the Downbeat Scholarship. So can you describe the training that eventually led up to that scholarship? So what did you do from that point, from Dave Brubeck up to the scholarship? So did you get lessons with a local jazz teacher, or how did you develop?
No, it was the School of Hard Knocks. I answered an ad in the paper. Some young guys my age were looking to form a little jazz group. And that was the first time that I ever played with a bass player and a drummer. I didn't know what I was doing, but, I started to learn how to improvise on chords and some tunes. And then there were very serious players at that time in Auckland. The generation just before me had left to go to Sydney in Australia to the big time. And the man in question there would be Mike Knock. Mike became very well known in the jazz circles. He had a group called Fourth Way out of San Francisco with Mike White, I think, on violin, and a few other groups he played in. And he teaches at the conservatory now. But I didn't know Mike, but I knew the players that played with him. And they sent me home in tears sometimes at 2:00 in the morning.
Why?
Because I didn't have the right feeling. And Tony Hopkins, the drummer, I remember very well, Tony, he he demanded, that I go home and listen to Wynton Kelly and to those kind of people. And that was the only time I really imitated anybody, was that feeling of Wynton playing the eighth note. And I copped a couple of licks that Wynton played, and I brought them in my own way to the gig that I was playing with Tony Hopkins. And I started to use some of these things where they sat in the time. And they're kind of, how do I describe it? Rather than the time, you become embedded in the time. You become the time. And that's the feeling that this great music has. And I looked and I could feel as if I was leaning back on my chair, metaphorically, and I could feel Tony pushing my chair back, into the upright position. And there was this magnetic balance that I had and I look over at Tony, and he's looking at me while he's playing and smiling away. It was very moving.
Were you a big transcriber? You mentioned taking licks off the record. So did you write down licks? Did you copy whole solos, or did you just take parts of solos?
I never did any of that. I listened, and it's 90% of all music is listening. And once I had that feeling, and know where to put my eighth note, which is different than classical music, pop music, and everything. It's what we call the art of rhythm, and it's being inside the rhythm, and it creates this feeling which transcends, which my teacher Lenny Tristano called a life force. And that's the thing that even the most illiterate musical person can get. If they have an open mind and a sensitive musical ear, they respond to the feeling. And that's the thing that transcends technique, and everything else.
I'm really glad you brought up Lenny Tristano. I peripherally know his name from that bebop area, but I never got a chance really to listen to his work much and really dive into him. Then I saw that he was your teacher, he was your mentor when you were in Boston. I'd love to take this opportunity. So for people who are not familiar with Lenny Tristano, he was an important part of that period, and he was a very seminal figure in that period. Could you talk a little bit about Lenny Tristano? And there's a great, I listened to another interview and how you did a tremendous amount of work to just get lessons with him. You took you were so busy, but you took like a flight, like a week just to get to his place, just to take a lesson or something. It was something absurd, but
my whole life's been absurd.
I got to tip the hat to you, man. You are a serious man, I got to say.
I get very tired thinking about it, believe me.
So how are the lessons with Lenny? And yeah, let's talk about that. So do you remember your first lesson with him?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, because I was a student, I could fly down every Monday, which was my day off from school. I could fly down for $20 round trip, rain, hail, or snow, on a turboprop to LaGuardia. And then I would take a bus to the E train out to Flushing, where Lenny lived, and then I'd walk up to his house. You can see all this on YouTube, by the way. There's a very wonderful documentary on Lenny. The name of it escapes me, but it's there. And of course, all his music is on YouTube now. But so I would go to his front porch and knock on the door. I was the only student. He saw me on a Monday because of my schedule, but his regular teaching days, I think, were Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And I would wait, but I don't recall my very first lesson, other than just being in awe of this man, this great master. But what we basically studied, he had certain techniques to apply, finger techniques and chordal techniques, which are determined by how you feel and what you're thinking. In other words, a lot of jazz players I hear, it's finger technique. But the more dangerous and the more beautiful and the more daring music is music that is created by the mind through the fingers. The mind and the heart, of course.
How did he train you to build that connection?
Well, as I say, by very slow scales with certain fingerings, so that your mind is very aware of every note and sound you're making. Piano players don't get to have a vibrato or anything, but you can think and imagine it, so that not every eighth note is equal, like in classical music or pop music. They all have their individual sound. When you slow down a very fast Bud Powell phrase, each of those notes has its own character. This intensifies the emotion. So the other thing I had to do was basically begin at square one again with Louis Armstrong improvisations, and particularly Lester Young. And if they were too fast for me to hear, we would get the old LP out. They're coming back. And you have to slow it down to half speed.
Did he also have perfect pitch as well?
That I don't know. I don't think he did. But he had a very, very sophisticated ear, that's for sure.
I read that he made his students sing solos. So is that something that he made you do?
That's what I mean. First of all, you had to listen to Lester. You never transcribed these things. It was all by listening. And first of all, you would learn to sing. If it's 8 bars or it's a whole chorus, whatever, you sing Lester's solo. And that means the vibrato, the articulation, everything about it. That which eighth note is more emphasized than the other eighth note. And then when he feels that you have that particular part of it mastered, and then you can sing without the record, then he has you go and sit at the piano and very slowly recreate the solo on the piano. Now, this seems to be a laborious process, especially because I had already been playing in clubs since I was 16. And I was already playing in Berklee and the bands and everything. And I would go to Lenny and I would start right from square one. But I've always maintained that feeling. And when I practice now, I practice that way of connecting my fingers to my brain and to my heart. And so it's a laborious process, and it's dangerous, I say, because in front of a lot of people, that brain and heart might not be working that day, and you don't have a repertoire of licks to pull you through.
Can you mention a few Lester Young recordings that are really important that people should perhaps learn to sing?
Well, let me see. I would say, well, The Lady Be Good. These are all from Count Basie recordings from 1938, I think, around 1930 something. It's Count Basie's orchestra and Lester's solos, particular solos on Lady Be Good. Pound Cake is a blues, a very important solo. It's only 2 choruses of the blues, but everything is in there, every secret you wanted to know.
Oh, I'm going to check that out after this interview.
Everybody else is chunking along, but when Lester comes in, it's that feeling which is directly related to Louis Armstrong. And it's Louis Armstrong that is the teacher of us all.
Did Lenny meet Lester Young? Because they were kind of around that period, right?
No, that's an interesting question. I don't know that. I don't think so.
Because Lenny did meet, he played with Charlie Parker, right? Yeah. Multiple times. And yeah. Charlie Parker was pretty influential on Lenny. Is that fair to say?
Oh, that's changed his life. But I think Lenny told me that he played in a club called the Three Deuces. This was when he was like a new hotshot from Chicago in the early 40s, coming with his trio and playing with 3 hands, faster than Art Tatum. And he had a gig.
Yeah, you mentioned that. You mentioned he would cut Art Tatum on the record, right? He'd play faster than Art Tatum.
Yeah, and he could. But he said what changed his life is that gig he had with his trio playing opposite Bud Powell's trio.
Okay, wait, that is an epic story. I want to get to that in a second. But you mentioned Charlie Parker just before that. Talk about Charlie Parker's and Lenny. So they played together. Did Lenny ever mention Charlie Parker to you? Like in terms of, and that's really the $1 million question. Did he ever mention anything Charlie Parker said about music or anything, or did they ever have conversations to that effect?
Oh, they certainly did. I can't remember specifically what Lenny would have, but he talks about it on YouTube. He talks about Bird and the things they talked about together. And Bird loved him, and because, like Lenny says, everywhere Bird went, every club he walked into, every saxophone player in the world was playing like Bird. Only better. Well, maybe, but it must have driven Bird crazy, So here was a small gang of people that had their own voice that was directly related to what Bird was searching for,
Let's talk about Bud now. So tell that story again, because the way you said it, I was almost in that room when you were talking, the way you were describing that gig that Lenny had opposite Bud. Could you talk about that gig?
I wish I could have been there for that. Whenever it was. But Lenny said he spent his sets practically underneath Bud's piano, and he couldn't believe that the same piano that he played, Bud was getting a feeling out of it that it was so intense, just from like some wood and some metal strings, and there was this humanity, intensity in it. So that's when Lenny devised his way of going back to square one and learning how to play from the heart and mind. And it's all music, all great music to me is when those levels, when the heart and the mind and the technique, when they are all, how do you say, the Holy Trinity,
in
perhaps.
Sync.
Yeah, when they are in sync, that's when greatness happens. That's when Mahler writes a symphony. That's when Bird plays one of his great solos, or Bud Powell.
Did Lenny meet, did he hang out with Bud? I know from reading about Bud that Bud was kind of a difficult guy, but did they ever get to chat about music?
I don't know that they did, but, Lenny, who was it that told me somebody told me that if Lenny was in the house and Bud was playing, Bud would give him a special seat, where Lenny could listen. But Lenny being blind and Bud being the person he was, the seat would be in the walkway down to the table. So everybody would be moving around Lenny, who would be sitting there. Just, or there would be, I did hear this story too, I'm giving away things, but where Bud would knock him on the head. Hey, anybody there, Lenny?
Wait, was that Lenny or is that George Shearing? Was that because I read about that in a biography with Peter Pullman.
I hope it was George.
I heard that Bud did some terribly mean things to George Shearing, which is people can read about. Yeah. But I get the sense that from what you're telling me that Bud liked Lenny, and a lot of people liked Lenny.
Yes. Yeah, Lenny. Well, see, he was a bit of a tyrant, though.
Okay, let's talk about that, because they say that Lenny Tristano's group of students, and you mentioned in an interview that you're not a Tristanoite, so to speak, but you took lessons from him and he influenced you. But they said that he was pretty harsh on his students, or he was very strict, or he was like really a tough taskmaster.
Yes, he was, but I wasn't. This was earlier, and I wasn't. That he had mellowed out greatly since then, and I have to say that he liked me a lot, and I liked him. There was some love involved there because of my dedication to the music, but I also had, because I had been playing, like I said, since I was young, I had my own voice, such as it is, already as a player, and it was just a matter of trying to find how to refine it and hone it into something worthwhile.
Could we get really technical, just like really bare bones things? So like what kind of things, basic things that he just expected you to know, arpeggios and that kind of thing, really mundane things, could you talk about?
Well, first of all, he felt that technique you can do on your own time. You can do all the scales and do everything, but just do it on your own time, not with him. He wasn't interested. What he was interested in is that thing that I'm telling you about, that connection. And one way of doing it was doing scales with the metronome at, say, quarter note equals 60. And then there were a series of fingerings that you would do. And the first would be the thumb and the index, so 1 and 2. And you would do all the scales very slowly, da, 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 even in those awkward positions of your fingers, going on the black keys to the white keys. Then perhaps you would go 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, all slowly like this. You should never lose your concentration, according to Lenny, though. If you do, you stop and you do something else. So have 5 minutes to yourself, do this. That way you cannot play anything without listening deeply to what you're playing. Sound you were making on the piano. I mean, it's a very intense thing. And the time that you are with the metronome. So, no matter how much technique you have, going back to this makes that connection for you. And he had a similar thing with left-hand chords, a series of left-hand chords, that trained your left hand how to accompany your right hand.
Would it be those kind of bebop fragments, like just a root and a 7 or a root and a 10th or a 3?
Yeah, that's very interesting, Nikhil. Yeah, they were more complicated than that, although very logical, like, so 1, 3, 5. Yes, okay. That's the C major, say. Then he would have for the left hand 1, 2, 3, 5. And then 1, 3, 5, 6. It's not like anything far up, but then 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So on and so on, developing and stretching your hand and all the inversions of this. And then that along with singing, that was the extent of my lesson. But it always ended with, well, play something for me. So I would play a standard song that I was playing recently or liked. And at the end, there was no judgment. It was simply, how, how, how did you feel? How did you feel? You know, and that's all that mattered to him. How did you feel? Because he knows that's the key to the music, you see.
Yeah, I think that's so profound because really, well, I mean, why do we play music in the first place? It's to get the emotion, to connect to the music, what you're playing. Yeah, that's right. That's the right way to think.
Also, Nikhil, remember, we're talking just about notes. A lot of people, lay people, even musical people, if there's some kind of music they're liking and you ask them to describe it to you, they will tell you what the lyrics are. They won't say, oh, it's an A flat minor seventh that goes on 120 bars. No, I'm just like, or it's C to F to G for 10 minutes.
One thing I absolutely love about you, Alan, is you have this, you say it's another side to you of when it comes to arranging and orchestration that you say comes from your classical side. I really think it's just it's just the whole part of you that's expressing or something. It's just your arranging ability is world class. It's absolutely world class. And I'd love to talk about just your approach to arranging and orchestrating. And when did you start writing arrangements? And when did you start consciously thinking about writing parts and arrangements?
Thanks for that observation, Nikhil. It really is true that it's the same part of me that needs to express something beautiful, which to me is the symphony orchestra. That's the beauty of sound with notes. And great music, of course, has a feeling to it different than jazz. But when I got to Berklee, I knew that I wanted to express something there. The technique of Gil Evans, that's Gil, G-I-L, and Duke Ellington, all the great things, Billy Strayhorn. I was introduced to that music, and there was always a big band available where I could hear what I'd written. Then, of course, I went to on the road with Woody Herman, and I had to unlearn all my Gil Evans stuff.
Because it didn't quite suit that setting, right? That's what you mentioned.
Yeah, that's for sure. So that was another thing. But my problem was, and all that time, was that I was still writing like a piano player. I never could get that. It was always piano music that I was conceiving and trying to figure out how to make it work with a band or something.
I've heard that from orchestrators. They say that even though the piano is just a great instrument, it almost is kind of like an orchestra, but I know what you're saying. It's not really an orchestra. It can kind of get the shades of an orchestra, but an orchestra is really its own thing.
That's what I had to years of, autodidact training, reading scores. I have a whole wall full of scores here that are now in 2 gigabytes on my computer.
When you were starting out looking at scores, what were you looking at specifically? It must have connected to the idea of feelings as well, right? How instruments, with the parts come in and that kind of thing. So how do you break down a score when you look at a score?
Well, now is different than then. Now I see the whole thing. But at the beginning, when I was in Boston, I started collecting my scores, Ravel, of course, because it was so beautiful. And I would open a score, and it was a complete mystery to me. Daphnis and Chloe, Debussy. I just loved Jeu and Afternoon of a Faun. And I would look at the scores and just imagine, listen to them. But it was always mysterious. And Bartók, I have all of Bartók's scores. And then Beethoven was Beethoven. I was trying to, even then, reduce it all to a piano.
Did you look at piano reductions and make a comparison between them?
I should have, but I didn't really. There were none at that time. Not like you can, again, YouTube has all kinds of piano reductions. operas and everything. It wasn't until I was going to a early morning session with Nelson Riddle at Universal when I was about 30, and I heard this music, and I was early to the session, and I was in the parking lot, and I heard till the end, because it sounded to me like everything that I had ever wanted to write was there before me. And I've told this story, but it was Mahler's first symphony when he wrote it. Well, he wrote it when he was about 28 or so. So I ran after the gig. I ran to the music store and found the first symphony. And for the first time in my life, after all my collection of scores, I had none of Mahler. I had an old Ninth Symphony that was just too Teutonic for me when I was at Berklee. I found it in a store somewhere, and I just couldn't listen to it. It was just too German. So I opened it, and for the first time in my life, here was somebody teaching me, you want this sound, you do that. You want that sound, you do that. Every page I turned, it revealed itself to me. That's how that goes. Not to mention the incredible composition technique. It was all spelled out in front of me. And from there, I began my learning. And I think 2 or 3 of the happiest years of my musical life, opening up a new movement of a Mahler symphony.
Yeah, those are gigantic orchestras, right? The Mahler symphonies. And okay, talk about Symphony 1. Describe Symphony 1. What does Symphony 1 mean to you? So let's go a little bit more in detail in the movements. Like, let's talk about Movement 1, for instance.
Well, you obviously have a young man who's in love, and the whole first theme is based on a crush he had with some singer. And why not? He was 28 years old. But the beginning opening of the harmonic strings, the beginning, the breaking of dawn, the mist over the marsh, everything slowly revealing it. You know, with Mahler, when he gives you a little idea, you know you're going to hear it towards the end. That's going to be a great big idea. But he's instilling these things into you, presenting them to you. You know, here's this little squawk of birds in the mist, you know, or here's the huntsman's horn off in the distance. All these things that he's presenting to you. And then this theme begins from the sound of a cuckoo in the mist. The theme begins until there's this amazing sunlight at the end. That's all visual things, but the visual is connected to the technique of composition and his form, where it's all laid out. You know, with Strauss and everybody else, it's, you know, it's a mire of difficult music to find, you know, and discover. But with Mahler, he just basically saying to me, hang in there. I've got something to show you. You know, just like Bud Powell. And I have the best of both worlds, because now I can, just through my own, I never studied, like I said, I know all Mahler's symphonies right down to the last note of the 10th.
I want to talk about Developing Story, the jazz trio and the orchestra. It's a masterpiece. It's unbelievable. And I like how you separate them and you gently put them together without kind of, like you've said, the orchestra, you can't make an orchestra swing, but you can make it have their different sections and really make it work and get them to work together in tandem beautifully as well, but understanding what they can and can't do, the jazz section and the orchestral section. Could you talk about the 3-movement piece, Developing Story?
Well, thank you again, Nikhil, for your understanding of that. It has been misunderstood, but those two sides of me finally got through the generosity of an angel, Ralph Kemper, who financed the whole thing for me. You know, I don't look like Diana Krall, and, you know, he just took the music and ran with it, and I bless the man. Anyway, that's my homage to Ralph. But this began maybe 40 years ago when I had this idea and was still struggling to figure out what to do with something like that. And so the three movements are based on this initial idea, and like my mentor and my God, Mahler, but in the most humble way, I try to spell it out for people that are sensitive listeners who might not know what's going on, but if they have an open mind and an open heart, they will see that there's something binding everything together, so that when the epiphany happens at the end, you will get that feeling of, oh yeah, and what makes it all worthwhile. Meanwhile, there are episodes that build towards this epiphany in the third movement. And the second movement is a variation on that theme. They're all, again, based on that little kernel of an idea.
Do you write with a pen and paper, or do you use like Dorico or Sibelius or some kind of sequencing software?
I'm a pen and paper guy only because now, over the years, my pencil and my paper are like my piano and slow scales. There's a connection. And I still have the opportunity when I'm looking at my sketch to vary it and to hear and place the instruments in it and on it. But if I do work with Sibelius, then I import it into Sibelius. But if I do that first, then I'm stuck with what Sibelius has. There's no imagination involved anymore. So that once the four horns are in there, they're the four horns. But maybe on reflection, these four horns might be nice with the clarinets or whatever, And it was that training that Mahler gave me, is that the piano now, when I'm at the piano, I'm not writing piano music. I'm quietly imagining on the piano what my orchestra is. So it might be a string line, but I don't know yet if it could tail into an oboe line, or it might be enhanced with the flutes, or there might, all these possibilities are there in my pencil sketch.
When you sit down to work and to write, how long is like a typical day of writing for you?
Oh, I avoid it at all costs. I go hiking with my dogs and look for wild creatures. But, right now I'm working on a project with a wonderful singer, Kristen Chenoweth. I did an album a couple of years ago of standards. She was the original witch in Wicked, and she's a Broadway star. And this producer, Steve Tyrell, who I've worked with, they decided they wanted an album to do with standard songs for her and get her away from the Broadway belting kind of thing. And so I was hired to write some charts for that album. And one of them, if I can toot my horn, was nominated for a Grammy. I'm a Fool to Want You. And so now we're working on the second album. And again, I here's a tune, When I Fall in Love. We all know that if we like standards.
Well, everybody knows your Grammy-winning one, the arrangement. Like, if you want to learn how to combine an orchestra with like a standard, that's the model. That's it.
There are other ones I'd rather recommend.
Other than yourself, who does the blend very well?
We're all afraid of Vince Mendoza. Vince is a scary person. He's one of the greats. If you want to listen to some of the greatest vocal arranging contemporary of standards, it's with Joni Mitchell, her standards album from how many years ago now? 10 years ago? That's Vince. And Vince has quite a reputation now. And, I go and sulk in my room and wait for something to call me, but
It's hard to imagine that. As great as you are, it's hard to imagine that.
I have certain monkeys on my back, that are looking over my shoulder.
Can you talk a little bit about working with Nelson Riddle, David Rose, Johnny Mandel? These are giants. So, but you were working as a pianist. Did you also ask them questions about arranging and that kind of thing?
Never did. I got to ghostwrite for David Rose, who wrote The Little House on the Prairie and did a lot of the Bonanza shows from yesteryear, and
The Stripper.
what a wonderful Stripper, and
It's great.
Holiday
Yeah.
Dreams. What a wonderful writer. He wrote totally for the orchestra. There was no piano involved. It was just, what you heard was the orchestra and how it goes. Wonderful guy. Nelson Riddle, I just happened to get a gig when I first got to LA. They were looking for a piano player. He liked to do his Sinatra charts with a young woman who sang in Sinatra's key, and he would do dance gigs with his big band. So I got a call, and there was Nelson Riddle. I couldn't believe. I had known the Wee Small Hours album of his with Sinatra since I was a teenager. And there he was. And I started working with Nelson on his TV shows way after Sinatra. And
what's he like? And talking to him, did he teach you anything?
No, never did. And I saw him work firsthand. I sat there waiting for some of his scores to take them to a studio somewhere.
Tell me something technical about his style. So, like, what is idiosyncratic about the way he works?
Well, I don't know if I can pin that down, but he was a pencil to paper guy. And again, he wrote at the piano. He had a big board that he had all his music on. But he would just quietly play chords, so that was kind of an influence for me. But every time I heard Nelson's orchestra, there was no piano in it at all. I'm talking, there was a piano part, but it was an orchestra.
Alan, did you read books on orchestration? You obviously looked at the scores. Are you more like, do you get it from the score itself, or do you read those treatises like Berlioz's book on orchestration and that kind of thing, and Korsakov's book on orchestration?
Yes, I have them all. Since I was a boy, I had them all, but I would just see the notes. And when they would talk about two flutes and an oboe with the French horn, I just saw the notes and wasn't able to connect. Now they have example one, on a CD or something, and you can follow along. But then it was just looking at notes. So it was my scores that did it to me more. I had all the technical knowledge, the range of the instruments, their articulation, et cetera, et cetera.
Name me a piece. I'll just name a composer. You name me a piece that you really like or that they orchestrated really well. It just fits really, really well for the ensemble. So if I say like Bartók, name a piece that is really special to you orchestra-wise.
Oh, that would be The Wooden Prince. That was an early one. It was written at the time of the Rite of Spring and everything, but it is the most amazing music. I mean, he has scenes in there of like the forest and the river, and it's just the puppet, the Wooden Prince itself, just the most amazing music.
If we could go deeper into that, what particularly did you like about the Wooden Prince?
Well, first of all, the music itself, the descriptive nature of it.
Was it the harmonic or the rhythmic textures?
The harmonic and rhythmic textures. That with Bartók was a freak. He was separate from all the other guys. And if you read about other musicians, they seldom talk about Béla Bartók. And then with the late string quartets and the concerto for orchestra, but the early things, Bluebeard's Castle is scary as the story. But the Wooden Prince, that's the one I would say is just a phantasmagorical piece of music.
Alan, do you dig the American symphonists like the Roy Harrises? Because I know Roy Harris has like there's one symphony which has a piano prominently in it. I think it was 8.
Yeah, I'm amazed you know about Roy Harris. The Third Symphony, everybody knows.
Love the Third Symphony,
yeah. Well, one of the most beautiful things ever written by anybody is the first movement of his sixth. It's called the Awakening. And these weren't available for years and years, but now you can find them on YouTube. And
What's special about the sixth, the first movement?
it's what it says. It's the awakening, and it's you can feel the spirit awakening to the glory of the stars, if you like. It's a human being coming to life and seeing for the first time.
And how about, like, for instance, for the American ones, Howard Hanson or...
Yeah, Hanson. I don't know. It's a bit too movie.
Too movie. Yeah, you made an interesting statement. You said, and especially with your developing story, and I agree with you completely when you say, movie music and concert music, they're very different, because movie music has to play to a scene, a very specific it has a very specific goal that it has to execute. But concert music, it's really a different... the music is speaking directly to you in the audience, and it's trying to get something out of you. It's not talking about any picture on a screen. And
even though when we listen to music like this, it does have a pictorial aspect to it, like Mahler's Mist or something, but it's my mist, and it can be whatever I like in the mist, and it's a different level of listening to, but how do we speak about John Williams? I mean, John Williams, geez. I think every composer in the world would like to be John Williams.
That actually reminds me of the Star Wars main theme. Somebody showed me Eric Korngold's King's Row, which is astonishingly similar to the main theme of Star Wars. And it got me thinking, like, all these classical... I think King's Row is a movie as well. But the older school, the European school... I love that harmony in the 20th century, and I like even if you took, like, the guy who did Ben-Hur, his name escapes me.
Miklos.
Yes. He was a serious composer, like Bernard Herrmann. Even though they did a lot of film, they were very serious composers. Did you like any of that those composers, like Bernard Herrmann?
In the context of the movies, I do. When I take it out of context, then I find them lacking in development and counterpoint, and it's on the surface basically, and it's beautiful.
Did you study counterpoint and very formally in that regard, or did you teach yourself counterpoint, or is it natural to you, like writing counter melodies?
Well, it's natural to me, and a lot of times a real problem because I don't know enough, and but I did it through books and a little bit at Berklee, but that's about it, and just observing. I mean, I open up the burlesque of the Ninth Symphony of Mahler, and my jaw drops. It's just astonishing that a man could write something like that, never hear it in his lifetime.
No kidding. He never heard it.
Oh, he died before he heard that, and never to use a computer or any. And it's the most, when the horns are playing, they're doing horn music. When the flutes, when the ensembles, it's all, and the counterpoint is like fireworks. It's just absolute fireworks exploding all over the place. That's what I'm listening for, my fire.
Alan, I want to ask you about Lady in the Lake and Children of Lima from your album Developing Story. Could you just talk briefly about each piece and how you came to write those pieces?
Well, now we're getting deep and personal. So, Lady in the Lake is about a lady from a long time ago who keeps coming to the fore in my life. And it's just a tribute. So in my own humble way, when I have a feeling about something, it usually translates into notes. So my feelings become notes on a good day when I'm not thinking about it, and suddenly something appears. And that's what happened with that one. The same with Children of Lima. Only I got to have a second chance at orchestrating it and everything. I originally wrote it for Woody and the Houston Symphony at a time when I was writing piano music. And I got to do it again for Ralph Kemper on this album, where I could put what I know about counterpoint and orchestration together into the piece that was latently there already. I just didn't know how to do it. So, that's for children, the underprivileged children.
If you're sitting at the piano and you want a certain feeling, how do you experiment?
Well, you see, that's the thing with this, is that the feeling comes with the notes, and that might be 2 bars. It might be a whole song. Sometimes, once every more than blue moon, that'll happen. But usually I get a feeling of something, and a few bars or even a few intervals will happen. Then I have to knuckle down, like practicing, and I have to work it out. That's and then I imagine this particular little idea in various guises and situations, and turn it upside down and lengthen it, all those things you do in classical music.
Do you like to take a theme and really play with a theme, or do you like to have constantly new material within a piece?
Well, the new material, if it's to be a classical, or a deep piece of orchestral music, to me, it all has to be of a piece. But, that's different than a standard song. A standard song is not that kind of animal, There's a way of conducting. So, in other words, I know some film composers that cannot write a tune. They try at it. But, the only one was David Raxon, and of course,
Henry Mancini.
Yes, but Bronislaw Kaper, But I don't know about Henry's movie writing. Who am I to judge Henry Mancini, for goodness sakes? But it's just what I feel about music.
Name me your 3 favorite players in jazz and your 3 favorite composers in the classical world.
All right. Well, there are more than 3, of course, for everything. But if there's somebody I listen to, it would be early Bill Evans. I have to be specific about the people because.
What's special about early Bill Evans to you?
The spontaneity and the harmony, of course. We had never heard harmony in jazz like that. And his early feeling for the time, like on New Jazz Conceptions, it's Bud Powell.
He said Bud Powell was like a huge influence on him.
Oh, yes. Any jazz pianist of worth has that feeling. So therefore, Bill Evans, Bud Powell, and I would have to say Charlie Parker, because every time I listen to Bird, I learn something. And I'm at the stage now where it's a waste of time for me to listen to music that isn't going to teach me something. So those are those 3, I guess.
Are you still teaching yourself? Like, what's an Alan Broadbent? What would a person like you, such high level caliber musician, what are you teaching, trying to learn and every day?
I'm from square one every day. Honestly, if you're open, you have to be vulnerable and open to the experience. So I practice every day, and I either, usually for my own peace of mind or my inner peace, I will study just pages of a Mahler score, or I'll listen to Bird, the people I'm mentioning, and the 3 classical. I would, well, obviously Mahler. I guess. Well, I guess I'm vacillating between Ravel and Debussy, and I listen to a lot of music. I love Webern, I love Schoenberg, I love all the contemporary American composers, John Adams.
Schoenberg, like his Transfigured Night, that is some beautiful tonal stuff going on, especially that when he goes to the final major. It's gorgeous. Yeah. Like, people think he's just this crazy guy who's doing these off the wall kind of things, but that guy can really write like straight stuff if he wanted to.
Well, Schoenberg, See, I find great beauty in his later works. I find great beauty in the 5 pieces for orchestra. Phenomenal. And he wrote this at a time when Mahler was writing his 9th. Schoenberg was doing this.
They both knew each other, and I think Mahler was looking after Schoenberg.
That's right.
I think so. And I think there's a funny line he said, like, who will look after Schoenberg when I'm gone?
That was on his deathbed. He said that. He asked Alma, take Schoenberg. But I think the third would have to be specifically the Rachmaninoff piano concertos.
Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite one?
Well, the 4th is my favorite.
The 4th. Why the 4th?
I don't know. It was difficult for him to write, to put it together. He had to try a few times. But I don't know. There are just epiphanies in it that mean a lot to me. The ending of the first movement, the incredible burst of the explosion that happens at the end of the final movement in the piano, in its highest register, and big chords working down as the orchestra. It's just phenomenal.
I'm gonna have to listen to that. Yeah, they were real. Yeah, they were. That's it. When we talk of the Budds, the Charlie Parkers, the Chopins, and Chopin was a great musician too. All of these guys, the Bachs and the Mozarts, man. I mean,
You're reminding me though of a wonderful story bringing it together. Is Arnold Schoenberg, who lived out his life after during the war and everything in Los Angeles, and the great David Raksin studied with Schoenberg and
kidding.
Oh yeah. And the story goes that Raksin said to Schoenberg at one lesson, he said, I'm sick of all this Hollywood stuff. I don't do this anymore. I want to be a serious composer. And Schoenberg's jaw dropped. And he said to him incredulously, he said, but you wrote Laura.
Yeah, that's right. Wow.
That's Schoenberg for you. Wow. What else could you want to do? You wrote Laura.
Okay. In your opinion, what are the best, well-constructed jazz standards, personally, to you? Like, you just think that is a well-written song. To me, like all the things you are, I think that's as good as it gets. But
you're talking standards,
like jazz standards, yeah. Like, in your opinion, what are just perfectly, brilliantly written standards?
Harry Warren, I Wish I Knew. Oh man, that's come at me from left field. There are so many I love so much. I guess My Foolish Heart. I'm an old romantic, of course. Well, all of them.
And the funny thing is, those were pop songs back in the day. It's amazing.
Well, they were written for singers to perform. They weren't. Imagine if Frank Sinatra wrote all his songs. They'd probably be the most unmusical things you ever heard. I don't know. Oh, he did. He co-wrote a couple, but now all the artists are themselves songwriters, and that wasn't the case back in those old days. But we're still playing those songs. Here I am writing When I Fall in Love again for Kristen Chenoweth, as if I'd never written for it before, and I approach it with a certain feeling that I didn't have before, and I never refer to any arrangement I've done before. It's all new, and these things will keep revealing themselves in new ways to every musician from now until the end of time. I know it.
If you take a song that you're going to do on like another project, and you've never perhaps really done that song before, do you listen to old recordings of the people who've done that song, or do you like to take a fresh look at it, or what's your way of taking a song and like making it your own, so to speak?
Well, I listen, so I'm within the ballpark of how it's supposed to go. I do listen to various versions, but I'm listening more or less to the singer than the arrangement. But I just go to my piano and I wait. I wait for whatever it is I'm waiting for. the blank page syndrome, you know?
Well, Alan, you are one of the top guys in the world. World class, absolutely world class. And just what a monster talent. I highly encourage everyone to buy Developing Story. It's a masterpiece. And Alan, it's been such a pleasure for me to have you on the show. I really hope you had a good time.
Oh, it was a very unique experience for me, Nikhil. I've never been asked questions like you've asked, so I appreciate it very much.
I'm going to actually, later on, going to listen to first the Lester Young recording and then some Mahler. I'm so curious to I mean, actually, it's funny. When somebody actually recommends a song to me, it's different when like a friend recommends something. You kind of have that.
Yeah, Lenny Tristano used to say when two people listen to something, it has a different intensity to it.
Yeah, that's right. That's it. That's exactly right. That's the thing.
So you're welcome to come here to my couch in Orange, New Jersey, and we'll listen to music some evening.
Don't say that. I'll be there next week if you don't say that.
All right. I will say it.
All right, Alan, thank you so much. What a legend, and thank you for coming on the show, and have a great rest of the day.
Same to you, and you're very welcome, Nikhil. Till next time.